Right, welcome everybody to this morning's meeting. The first part of the meeting, the public meeting, is going to be focusing on the strategic route network and the key route network in Kirklees. So it's following on from the work that we've done on transport, on rail issues. We're now moving on to the major road issues. So welcome everybody to the meeting. Firstly, if we can have a look at the minutes of the previous meeting from the 18th of January. I'll just give you a few seconds to have a look at those, and then could I just ask you to approve those before we go on to any matters arising. Right, everybody happy with those? So, so we can approve those. Right. Any matters arising? I've got a couple of things to just update people on. Anything else? Okay. Right. Any particular things that people want to bring up? Right, a couple of things I wanted to mention. Looking at item 5, which was the where we were looking at the rail issues, the things that we resolved. Number 2 was that we were going to follow up some of the issues that we discussed in January. One of the things to report back on is that the new timetables that are coming in for the Transpennine routes, I think those are imminently due. I think elements of that have already come out, and I do know that there are a number of public meetings planned by various groups at the end of March, early April, to have a look at what's happening with the new timetables. And I think it would be useful, possibly in the March meeting, to perhaps have a brief look at what's happening as a result of those. Anybody got anything else? Yes, Martin?
Thanks, Chair. No, I'm just waiting for that to come on. Thanks, Chair. Do we have to introduce ourselves or no, for the cameras or not? I didn't know. Yeah, you're right, because I think we should be speaking to the rail operators. But I think, and partly today talk about roads, I think it'd be useful to understand how bus services both integrate with rail transport and locally, because there have been some changes made to bus services, which residents, particularly in North Kirklees, are quite concerned because it's isolating them, meaning the journey to get to Calderdale Hospital is now a two-phase journey where they have to wait in Brighouse for a connection. And as today, trying to come from Murfield to Huddersfield via Brighouse because the road is blocked, that could be terrible. So we need to understand integrated transport on both modes, I think, Chair, you're right.
Yeah, I think that's a really important point, and we did touch on it, I think, at the last meeting, that it's okay having better train services and better stations and things, but it's how people get to those places. Plus, the vast majority of public transport journeys are actually made by bus rather than train. It's really, really important for Kirklees that we have good services. The other thing to just to inform you about is that for the 15th of March meeting, we have actually confirmed that Kieran Duncan, who's the manager of the Transpennine upgrade project, is going to come along to talk to us in a private meeting. And I think the intention there is that we're going to cast a sort of wider net in terms of inviting councillors to come along to that meeting. Peter, yeah.
I read in the Times yesterday that there's going to be a major announcement soon from Network Rail about £57 billion investment, and the first priority, according to the Times, is Transpennine, that they're going to spend a big chunk of money on Transpennine. So that, I think, prefaces probably an announcement we want to hear, which would be electrification. It does sound as though some form of electrification is going to happen, and fairly soon. And they're talking about the next 5-year programme. Again, I'm just going on what I read in the Times, but it could be really significant.
Yeah, as Peter, I think, keeps mentioning in council meetings, this is going to be absolutely crucial, really, for the future of Kirklees. I think it's such an important topic, and it's really good that we've got the person who's in charge of this project to come along and talk to us. Yeah. Judith.
In those minutes, we did ask for more information on the demand between Dewsbury and Leeds and Dewsbury and Huddersfield, the figures. So if we could have those figures before that meeting, that would be really helpful, and the bus links.
Yes, Martin.
Yeah, thanks, Chair. Just one thing which concerns me, as we're looking about transport, and we're obviously reflecting on our integration with things, concern that I've raised. There is a series of meetings which Transport for the North are doing, consultations with stakeholders. There's one today in Halifax, there's one in Bradford, one in Leeds, one in York. It doesn't take Einstein to realise that they're not having one in Kirklees. I've raised that with West Yorkshire Combined Authority and asked them to raise that with Transport for the North, because why is one of the West Yorkshire authorities missing out on this? Why are Kirklees businesses and residents having to go to Halifax, Leeds or wherever? There's a weighty tome that you read through, and colleagues may wish to consider whether Kirklees, I don't know, either through Cabinet, through officer level or through scrutiny, whether we express concerns at TFN. I don't think they've asked if we want a meeting, but certainly I'm sure Cabinet colleagues would have accepted a meeting if it had been offered.
I agree entirely with Martin. We've raised the issue a number of times. There have been, I think, 3 major consultations that have taken place, Transport for the North in West Yorkshire, and none of them have included Kirklees. They've all been in Bradford, Leeds. I think Harrogate was in the last round. And really it's significant the fact that when Transport for the North was being agreed, when we transferred power to them, I did raise the issue of, could one person, the leader of Leeds, speak on behalf of the whole of West Yorkshire and its interests? And clearly we've got a very particular interest, just been talking about TransPennine, crucially important. It's critical in the whole programme of Transport for the North. And then we read of this fast link across the Pennines, which is going to go directly to the centre of Bradford and so on. Now that's got huge implications for our 2 major towns, and it's not good enough that Transport for the North vaguely holds consultation without true accountability and excluding, in economic terms, the second most important part of West Yorkshire, because economically Kirklees is more important than Bradford. In population, almost the same size. And I think this is not recognised, certainly in West Yorkshire.
Yeah, I agree with both your comments, and I think reading the report that you've got on the table there, Martin, there's very, very little reference to Kirklees or any of the constituent parts of Kirklees, and much smaller areas, both in terms of population size and economic importance, seem to get a lot more prominence. I think the only place we feature is actually on one of the maps. I couldn't find anything else, which is shocking. So I think outside this meeting we need to follow that up. Yeah.
Through you then, Chair, can I propose that we express our concerns and should we
Right, okay. Is everybody happy about that? Yeah, okay, thank you. So, Steve, you've got that, haven't you? Right, if we can move on from the minutes.
Membership of the committee, we've got anybody today attending as a substitute. Interests? Anybody have any interests?
Again, Chair, just on this, as we are discussing transport issues, I'll just declare that I'm a Kirklees representative on West Yorkshire Combined Authority Transport Committee.
Yeah, and I guess I should declare that I'm the chair of the Slathwaite and Marsden Action on Rail Transport Group. Admissions of the public. Certainly for the first part of the meeting, up till about 11:15, all public would be admitted to any aspect of this meeting. So it's a public meeting. Right, so if we can move on to the item number 5, which is our second element of how I'll look at transport issues, which, as I say, is looking at these strategic and key road issues. So if I can welcome to the meeting Simon Taylor, who seems a familiar face at these meetings with various things, and also Keith Bloomfield, who's coming in to take part in this presentation as well. So over to you, Simon.
So just a quick introduction from me, Chair. I'm Simon Taylor, I'm the Head of Strategic Investment. And we're going to go through what is not necessarily our last presentation on transport from what I've heard this morning, but it is the latest in a series of sort of small strategic issues around transport. We're going to touch on the strategic route network and the key route network for Kirklees and what some of the developments are around that. I'm going to hand the presentation over to Keith. Keith is our sort of transportation lead, so he will be leading on the sort of programme management of development of some of our schemes, and he's involved in a lot of the transportation work with the West Yorkshire Combined Authority and Transport for the North as well. So I'm going to hand over to him, and in our usual style, feel free to ask questions as we move through the slides, and hopefully we can generate some debates at different points in this presentation. So it's over to Keith.
Okay, good morning everyone. Topics of discussion for today's meeting are strategic road network, the SRN, and the major schemes, projects and piece of work that have been done by various bodies. I've just put a note there what the SRN means because there can be confusion what the SRN is, but it's basically the most significant roads, trunk roads and motorways within England, and they're managed essentially by Highways England. And then I'm going to talk about the West Yorkshire Key Route Network and the major schemes that we're planning on the Key Route Network. And our Key Road Network in West Yorkshire and in Kirklees is based on the number of vehicles that use them. The metric we've used is 20,000 journeys per day on those roads, and they've made for identifying what our key road network in Kirklees and throughout West Yorkshire is. So moving on. First of all, I want to talk about strategic road studies that are happening and the DFT are leading on in collaboration with Transport for the North. So this is about really the northern powerhouse and where the sort of strategic road investment is happening in and around Kirklees, but in a much wider area in the north, basically. In 2014, the DFT announced there'd be 6 major road studies. They carefully thought about 3 in the north and 3 in the south, so to give that sort of balance, I think. Basically, the first one I want to talk about is the Northern Transpennine, which is the A66 Penrith to Scotch Corner, and the A69 Carlisle to Newcastle. Moving on. The location of the 3 studies that I'm talking about, which is the Transpennine Tunnel, which I think they'd be more interested in, and then the Manchester North West Quadrant around the M60, are all listed on the next slide to give it some sort of mapping of where they are in conjunction with the West Yorkshire region. The North Transpennine Corridor is concerned with the box listed in A, which is Scotch Corner to Penrith and the A69 Carlisle to Newcastle. Interestingly, the government have said that they're supporting the A66 work, so that basically is dualling 5 sections of dual carriageway along the A66 to improve journey times, but they're not going to do, and they're not looking to dual the A69. Now, looking into the research of why that's happening, it seems to say the A69 dual carriageway works is going to cost too much and it's too challenging. So they're looking at remodelling a couple of intersections along the A69 to bring benefits on the A69. However, the journey times between the journey times are slower on the A69 than the A66, but the focus of attention is on the A66. So you can read into will. So the government's response in the autumn statement on that, the A66, A69, is we have committed to dualling the A66. We are bringing forward improvements on the A69 to be complete by 2020. But when they do actually mention the M62 and its co-dependency on those pieces of work, further detailed work needed on the interaction with other routes, such as the M62. So there's other works in the pipeline that may or may not affect regional roads within our area. The Trans-Pennine Tunnel. 5 corridors were looked at. I've listed there on the next piece the 3 that are in focus. As you move north, Corridor A is the one that's most favoured, B is less favoured, and C is less favoured still. They all meet the project aims, whatever they were. They're all within the study area, and more importantly, I think, for everyone, and certainly the environmental impact, is they do not involve a surface route through the national park. The interim report is out and dated July 2016. There is a strategic case for the scheme, whichever route you look at, A, B or C, so the strategic case has been made. It's technically feasible, but significant challenges are noted to link to the strategic road network as detailed. So technically feasible to build the tunnel, but difficult to link up to the strategic road network.
If you just go back onto the map, Keith. I don't know if we can bring the map back up so colleagues can look at that. Yeah, because when we're looking at it, obviously as a Kirklees scrutiny panel, I think what we need to be looking at that is there's only one road that's vaguely shown, the A629, I think it is, up there with a little wiggle to the right. That one. If we can't, we need to be looking at the impact of the tunnel, the Woodhead roads and other ones on Kirklees. There's been much talk recently about road improvements on the Woodhead Pass and the amount of money that Highways Agency, Highways England over the years have spent on this. The impact of that is that the roads from Kirklees, either across Home Moss or going up through New Mill, Jackson Bridge, that area, we need to be looking at what the impacts of those will be on our roads. Because if you improve those, Corridor A as a cross route from Manchester, people from this area will gravitate to that rather than going around the M62. We've got to make sure that we or the government or Highways England are future-proofing our roads so that we don't end up with a congestion over particularly Home Moss, which is not suited to the high volumes of traffic and in bad weather. So I think if we could feature that, if officers could make sure that the impact on Kirklees is noted on that, we can make sure it's always in our minds.
Yeah, I do think that's a good point. I think for people living in south and west of Kirklees, that will be potentially quite an important route. Could be positive aspects in terms of speeding up journey times over to Greater Manchester, Stockport and places like that, but there could be issues as well in terms of the feeder roads. Thank you.
Yeah, noted. Interestingly, one statistic I'd like to throw in there is when we're talking about a Manchester to Sheffield connection, between the two areas and the two regions at this moment in time, the latest stats we've got is 13,000 people travel between those two localities on a daily basis. However, 67,000 travel between West Yorkshire and the Greater Manchester area. So focus on a tunnel with 13,000 and 67,000 linking us to Greater Manchester, I think is food for thought.
How do you go from Huddersfield to Leeds?
I don't have those figures to hand, but I can produce a map and a route. One of the questions was how many people travel between Dewsbury and Huddersfield.
Yeah.
And I think I'll take those questions and I'll complete that and return that back.
Yeah, it would be really interesting to look at that. I think linking this back to what we were looking at with rail, with the rail links, there's a lot of emphasis in this Sheffield-Manchester link, and there seems to be the same thing with the roads as well.
Okay, then moving forward in terms of what the government have said. Not surprisingly, they've said that the Trans-Pennine Tunnel study requires further analysis of user benefits in order to make a case for change. They did mention in the report, which I've read, that the tunnel options seem very expensive, not surprisingly, and the alternative solutions will be to improve Snake Pass and Woodhouse. So it all depends where your thinking is on what they're actually looking to bring forward. Okay, thank you. Next one. And then the final piece of work that the DFT are doing is around the M60 Northwest Quadrant. When I've looked into the stats around the Northwest Quadrant, obviously everybody familiar with the M60, so it's only about 6 miles we're talking about on the M60. The network clearly has insufficient capacity. Doesn't take rocket science to work that one out. Obviously that enables poor journey time reliability and average speeds as low as 15 miles an hour, resulting in many vehicle hours delay. I'm going to talk about some West Yorkshire Transport Fund schemes later on where we don't hit the 15 miles per hour. So that is quite quick on some of our roads, and the emphasis on our roads, I think the case is made when I talk about the average speeds on some of our roads as well. So the area of interest is the M60, M62 junction, and as I say, a 6 mile corridor between there and the 66 junction.
Just a comment on that, and yeah, grammatically it's correct that the motorway network has insufficient capacity, but reflecting on what we were saying earlier about Transport for the North, why aren't they looking at an integrated approach? A number of those vehicles will be trying to access Manchester Airport and things like that. If there are, through Trans-Pennine Route Upgrade and others, if there's ways of encouraging people to use alternative modes, then the network may not need having, you don't need to engineer your way out by building bigger motorways. If you can put people onto the rails and things like that. So yes, whilst currently the motorway hasn't got the capacity, either because of peak time running and things like that, but TfN should be looking at that and not just investing millions of pounds in putting more concrete down, but getting people from A to B by the most sustainable methods.
Yeah, completely agree with that. I spent a couple of years working in the centre of Wigan and driving to Wigan, and part of this is just an absolute nightmare at rush hours. But if you then try and use train services with absolutely appalling quality trains, terrible timetables, things being cancelled, yeah, it puts you off. And I think you're right, we should be looking to switch more people onto better public transport to reduce the number of cars on the roads, yeah.
Thank you, Chair. Yeah, Transport for the North are looking at 3 options. Well, they looked at 4 or 5 options, actually, for the Northwest Quadrants. At an early stage, there was a max, public transport max option that picks up what the council has been saying in terms of either thinking about other modes as well. But the public transport option felt it didn't go far enough and was dropped at an early stage, to which we're left now with 3 options for the M60 Northwest Quadrant, which is the Northern Corridor, and that's a route that is shown on your plan in red to the north of the first one, so it's linking Wigan with Bury. There's a orbital route, which basically adds further capacity to the west of the roads as is, and again linking Bury with the M66. I think that's obliterated, I think it is. And then improving the existing corridor. So we always have a do minima, a do lots, and a do something in the middle sort of thing. And the do something is improvements to the existing corridor. But travelling on that route, it's very challenging to think how they're going to improve the existing corridor and to improve the capacity along that 6 mile stretch. Interestingly, some of the stats I've looked at is that the journey times, what it's saying is that any of those options, that they're looking to improve the journey time savings along that corridor by 96 hours in a given period. That's for the strategic people. So those are the people that are actually not working in that locality. They're actually using that network to get from A to B, but not actually stopping within the area. And 40 hours for locals. So those are the sort of metrics they're looking to. They also say that further refinement is required to cut the cost and provide the value for money that they're aiming for. So again, it's this benefit to cost and value for money exercise brought into the equation to bring the Optimus scheme forward. So they're saying all schemes are actually in programme, and they're still thinking about which scheme to bring forward as the prescribed scheme in amongst those three. Obviously that has benefits to us, though, benefits to further afield, and each one of those options benefit the north of England per se, because of the strategic location where we're talking about.
I think that's a really important point. Here it might seem that why should we be interested in Greater Manchester? Absolutely crucial that we are, because the money that's spent by Transport for the North, if they get it wrong here, we all suffer in road terms. Now, if they're going to resolve this problem, you yourself said you don't want to put more concrete down. Obviously, to some extent, we're going to have to, but you may remember some years ago, Greater Manchester proposed road charging and better public transport. I think they're going to have to come back to that because of the sheer scale of the problem, because minor road improvements like this, well, might solve the problem for 5 years, but the ongoing problem's got to be looked at in terms of the value of space on a road, and similarly, we've got to see it in terms of space on the road on the M62. We do need to use the hard shoulder or another lane either side on the M62, and that begins to resolve some of the problems. With regard, you were talking earlier about Sheffield. Irrespective of how it directly affects us and how many people, it's crucially important that Manchester and Sheffield are well linked, because the key to the whole northern economy is the link between Manchester, Sheffield and Leeds, and linking on to our two main ports, Hull and Liverpool. So we can't ignore Sheffield. Sheffield's important for huge numbers of people in Kirklees, particularly South Kirklees, many of whom work in Sheffield or work in the Sheffield City region. The problem is the proposal for the tunnel. It would be so long, it could be itself a danger. It would be extraordinarily expensive, but we do want to see the alternative, which would be an improvement to the existing network, and maybe, in rail terms, an opening up of the old, what was electrified route, which was only opened in, I think, 1960 and closed. That's got to be looked at again. So it's all part of the bigger picture, which does affect us.
Yeah, thanks, Peter. I think you make some really important points. I think Sheffield is very important. I think our links to Sheffield are really important as well. Thank you.
Okay, moving on for the next part, which is Transport for the North. They're expected to be granted statutory status by April 2018. Transport for the North is a partnership between elected members and the business leaders within our community. It's basically It's basically a group of people from the north of England working with national governments and national transport bodies to push the agenda for the northern cities. Probably fits in with devolution, I think. That's what they would claim, and I think they probably would agree with that. But it does not really, it shouldn't replicate anything that either strategic or the local people, the local sort of authorities are doing. It dovetails into that and becomes a bit of a to push forward for the northern economy. The key piece of work that they're undertaking is the transport plan, the 30-year plan, and that does include, picking up some of the earlier points, many interventions in the north, which you've discussed before, which are the improvements to Northern Powerhouse Rail, HS2, etc., in your rail discussions that you had previously. But it does include lots of other schemes that are road-based, water-based, and also multimodal-based as well. So it does pick up those sort of things. And it does pick them up in the short, medium and long term, because it's a long-term vision for economic growth by 2050. It is out to consultation, and as was mentioned earlier, whether we've got one in this area or not, we have been invited, albeit at a later stage, to the 3 that are running in our locality. I'm told the previous ones weren't very well attended, and I think the next one is in Halifax today. Yeah, and then there's further ones in Bradford. So anybody's allowed to go to those, and I think we probably need to widen the sort of circular for the invite, because the invite wasn't really that clear and didn't go widespread.
Yeah, just to pick up a detailed point on that, the feedback that I've been getting on the attendance in the North East is that those events attracted about 12 people per event, which is not an awful lot. Now that is maybe because people are not interested, it may be because they weren't very well publicised. So that's the scale of sort of attendance that we're getting there.
I do know it's been quite widely publicised by the Smart group, and there is a delegation of people going across to that meeting to express opinions. But I completely agree with you, and I think we should have had an event in Kirklees.
Thanks, Chair. I mean, hopefully officers and the Cabinet maybe will be considering a response to this in a Kirklees context. Given the timeframes now, is there any way that we can, through Scrutiny, Cabinet or whatever, engage with our businesses and that, so that the Kirklees view is put in? You know, if they're not going to do it, and as I said, we've asked through West Yorkshire, can we do something and make sure that the Kirklees voice is being fed in, and that in future, you know, there will, if we make enough noise, hopefully they will come here in future.
Peter.
Well, I take your point, Margaret. Our voice is expressed through officers. There is no mechanism for members to be involved in the program. There was at one time a local transport plan, West Yorkshire, and a committee that looked at that and looked at the various interests and priorities across West Yorkshire and so on, with the cabinet members from each of the districts represented and other co-optees. That's gone. Now, you know, they keep talking about devolution and the Northern Power. One, the Northern Power was a myth. The devolution, think of it. I'm making an issue of how can one person represent it in think of it, if there is a devolution so-called to Yorkshire as a whole with one person, how can that one person possibly represent the various interests, and they're different, very significantly different, Greater Bradford, Calderdale, Kirklees, North Yorkshire, and the disparates, the differences. You do need to be effective to reflect the public's view, representatives of each of those areas as well. If you're going to have a mayor, fine, but that representation is crucial, not because we want, as the Tories say, more bureaucracy. It isn't bureaucracy, it's the opposite of that. It's representation. What we have at the moment is increased bureaucracy, so a transfer from Whitehall to the bureaucrats in transport for the North, who are not held accountable at all.
Yeah, I share your concerns. I was talking to a group a couple of weeks ago about Transport for the North and the way they operate. And when I was researching it, I picked up a quote from Chris Grayling, and basically was saying, over to you guys, you are now going to be the people making the decisions. But I think that's very disingenuous for two reasons. One is the lack of real democratic accountability. And the other thing is we know that this is very much driven by the resources that are made available. So John McDonald, when he was up in Kirklees on last Friday, he did have an horrendous journey to arrive here with trains being cancelled and things like that, and going on a packed train coming in from Leeds. And he said to the business people, politicians there, why are you not complaining more? Could have done, yeah. He didn't, but yeah. But he was basically saying there's 12 times more investment going in per head of population down in the south east, where he's an MP, compared to what you were getting up here. Why are you not protesting more about it? And I think we do need to be vociferous about the fact that if we don't get this investment, we're not going to get the improvements in our economy that we need.
Interesting. The next thing is the work on the Central Pennines. By the way, I'll just give a link. You can get involved in the consultation online as well. So, if anybody's interested, there is a link to the 30-year strategy. So you can get your voice in there. But I will pick up the points in terms of one voice going to TFN, picking up the Kirklees interest in this. The Central. Sorry.
Are we actually going to get these slides online?
Yes.
Yeah.
Okay. The Central Pennines piece of work, that's linking Liverpool, Manchester and Leeds. The piece of work has only just been issued by TFN in September 2017. It involves all the others, basically Highways England, the DFT, etc., etc. And it's looking at long-term investment along the Central Pennines up to 2050. And it looks at, interestingly, it looks at road, rail and waterborne capacity that misses off other modes or other interchange, etc., pieces of work that it could involve, but whether that's meant or not, I'm not too sure. And then it picks up, the final piece is the Yorkshire to Scotland, quite a big area. Options for improving road and rail. It is seeking to complement the East Coast Rail Corridor to Scotland, looking at both road and rail together. And the works, as far as I'm aware, have not been issued for that piece of work yet, but it's something to keep an eye on. Finally, Highways England. M62 to M606, which we all should be interested in, has been delayed. And I've put the formal response from the government and from Highways England, which is reconsidered as part of future road investment planning. Basically, the Chain Bar scheme was one of 16 schemes nationally to be delayed with the rethink of do they actually provide value for money. Chain Bar is officially paused for further review. Basically, the reason that they've paused it is the benefits that were being derived from the Chain Bar intersection needed further work and further analysis of the M62 corridor. Basically, what it was saying is, to get the benefits for Chain Bar, you needed to do something quite substantial along the strategic corridor that links into Chain Bar, which we haven't really thought about, or we haven't yet determined, and that's why it's been paused or delayed, or whatever word you choose to use. I'll take questions on that. I think there might be.
Yeah, I use that. I use Chain Bar every day. Heading off to Leeds, and I use the 606 quite regularly. So they've just done quite a big piece of work down there, adding that fourth lane in there. So my first question is, what is this other piece of work that's stopped? What are some of the knock-on things that they need to iron out for this next piece of work to work? And the third question, which is a question that's probably been around for 10 years, there are five junctions to Chain Bar that would feed you from A roads or the motorway onto Chain Bar. And one of them, which is the one in from Lowmore and Oakenshaw, still, even with this work, doesn't have traffic lights. So the residents in Kirklees that live on that Oakenshaw end, as part of the Cleckheaton ward, the tailbacks on that, I think it's Bradford Road. Is it Bradford Road or Dewsbury Road? Bradford Road, isn't it? Yes, it goes past Cleckheaton Golf Club. That queue of traffic on that single lane, because there are no traffic lights coming onto the motorway, onto Chain Bar, is horrendous. Whereas every other entry point onto Chain Bar from every other direction, A58 and the bit that comes through Cleckheaton, are all traffic light controlled. The developments are great this time round. However, you'd assume that it would improve traffic flows coming through Oakenshaw, but it doesn't, because what you're doing now is you come into the junction from Cleckheaton Golf Club, and if you want to go to Dewsbury, whereas a few months ago all you had to do was to hit across 3 lanes to the inside lane whilst managing the hurtling traffic coming round with no traffic light delays, whereas now you've got to get across 4 lanes of traffic to the inside lane with this traffic hurtling round at you. So I often worry when you use sort of emotive words, but you really are dicing with your life, trying to hit across 4 lanes, avoiding the speeding traffic that's coming round. And I spoke to highways officers before about this, and I think, you know, Cleckheaton councillors have been on with this as well. It's a really missed opportunity that there isn't traffic light signals coming in from Oakenshaw onto Chain Bar. So I think there's 3 bits there, Chair.
Okay. What was proposed? The kinds of, and I haven't seen much detail, to be perfectly honest, about what was proposed before they delayed it or paused it. But the sum of money they were talking about in terms of the Chain Bar improvement was a localised improvement to the intersection. And what I mean by that is a full remodelling of that interchange. So that would have resolved some of the issues within the locality as a pinch point situation. So some of the issues you raise in terms of why isn't Oakenshaw Lane signalled, that would have been resolved with a pinch point scheme at the locality. But what it didn't do is it probably wouldn't have maximised the benefits, because they needed to do something quite substantial on the strategic road network itself.
Can I just come back quickly? Sorry, Martin. You know, I understand what you're saying. They've just spent millions on what they've done down there. And the bit that lingers is the relatively financially insignificant bit of either putting some traffic signals in at that junction or just simply altering the signal timings. But I'm led to believe that Highways England, all they want is traffic on the motorway and off the motorway as quick as possible. And we're sort of saying, well, those coming in from Oakenshaw, they can't get on there, they can't get to Leeds, they can't get to Dewsbury, they can't get anywhere. And all it would need would be a delayed signal on Chain Bar or a delayed signal for the traffic coming off the M62 just for like a second and a half, just to allow some of the traffic to come on to Chain Bar. And then they've got a fighting chance then of getting onto the motorway network.
I think in a previous life I was a traffic signal engineer, so I probably understand why they've not signalled Oakenshaw Lane. And it'll be the capacity of the circulatory will be hindered by extra signalling at that location. But what I will do is I will write to Highways England and ask them, as part of these works which are just taken place, why that wasn't considered, and ask them for a full response, if that's okay.
Yeah. Can I ask for more than that? Because we've got to have some. We want to talk circular about this, do we? What I think it really needs, very simply, in the short term, which would solve the long term, is just a delay on the signals. The lights that are on Chain Bar for the traffic that are already on, because when you come off from Dewsbury, where your first exit is to go onto the M62, You've got some lights before you get to the A58. And then you've got the lights of the traffic coming down off the M62, where your first junction would be A58. If those two signals were just delayed by a second and a half or so, it would just give that traffic. You'd get so much more traffic coming off Oakenshaw. You wouldn't need to invest in new signals. You wouldn't need to invest in anything. Yeah.
It's an important issue, this. Can I suggest that you have a chat with Keith, perhaps after the meeting at some point, to look at the details of that? And it would be good, Keith, if you could report back to us about what response you get to that. Yeah, Martin.
Thanks, Chair. And I agree with Darren that from a local perspective, Highways England don't seem to have a very filtered approach. Take any of the junctions which affect Kirklees, so within on our borders there, you've got Chain Bar, you've got Gildersome, Driglington, and you've got Tingley. The impact on our roads, they remodel their roads at will with no consideration to any other impact. With respect to future Chain Bar developments, I believe there's a planning application coming forward on the former sewage works at Byerley, just off. Is there a development line for any future works on Chain Bar which is protected, so that if, for example, Highways England decide sometime it's value for money, we don't end up with a fait accompli where there's a tin shed built on it and we can't use the land?
Simon,
yeah. So if you look at the new local plan, in fact, if you looked at the existing UDP, there is a piece of safeguarded land around that junction, which is protected for land required for a highway scheme there, and that has been carried forward into the local plan. And if I'm correct, and I might have to go back and check this, I think it's slightly bigger in the local plan than it was in the UDP. So that site at the waterworks is actually contracted a bit in terms of a development area. So that's probably the answer to that question.
So just before you move on, can I just go back to this consultation on the strategic transport plan? Can I just have some clarity around who's responding to it on behalf of Kirklees, and what the timescale is, and whether there's time for the scrutiny panel to see the consultation response, please?
The response to the consultation, because it's a combined authority issue, the responses are going via the combined authority. So each district can feed into the combined authority or will give one voiced opinion to the consultation. But that doesn't mean that authority can't actually, it's a public consultation, so that doesn't exclude anybody from actually taking part in that consultation.
So is there a Kirklees response, or do we have to have a formal recommendation that we form a Kirklees response and the scrutiny panel sees it?
I think from an officer perspective, I've put myself onto the Leeds session. I was going to speak to Peter as portfolio holder, whether or not he wants to attend that as well. And I think the intention will be is that we put together our thoughts from a Kirklees perspective and send them back on to TFN, irrespective of what the West Yorkshire Combined Authority do, which we'll also feed into.
There's no accountable member involvement, whether it's at district level or whether it's West Yorkshire level. Because when it goes to the Transport Committee never gets an opportunity to discuss that. So it's entirely officer-based. Now, I'm not suggesting the officers don't do a good job, I'm sure they do, but the ability previously through the LTP programme was to officers and members to sit together from the different districts to bring it to reflect on what is a balance, what is a compromise, because often it is, what's in the interests of the totality as opposed to the specific of a given district.
Yeah, so would it be useful for me to speak to you, Peter, on behalf of the panel, look at the response before that goes in? And we obviously need to do that fairly quickly, don't we? Yeah, Judith.
Can anything be done through the Kirklees Transport Subcommittee? can anything be formulated through that and put through that subcommittee? I don't know how it works, that committee.
Thanks, Chair. Yes, there are a couple of things. I think what Judith's referring to is the District Consultation Subcommittee, which is, from a wider point of view, is basically where the bus and train operators come at a local level and talk about changes that they've already made. So, the impact of this kind of thing, those meetings are predetermined. They're only just becoming more accessible by holding them in an evening. I think the issue that we need to do is either through this committee or through something to drive ourselves. There's consensus that we need to be, irrespective of a West Yorkshire view, because, again, as has been alluded to, there's a lot of things, not only Northern Powerhouse Rail bypassing Kirklees, but because of the strength of some of the authorities, Peter and I say loud and clear on those meetings that the Kirklees voice needs to be heard more. And I think we need to be independently wading through this, either at going to the meetings there if possible, but making sure that an independent Kirklees view is put across to represent our people. I think there's cross-party consensus on that today.
Yeah, and so I will certainly work with Peter to look at that response. And I think your earlier point about bus services and their importance, I think that's something that we should know. And I hope going forward, perhaps into next year, that is something that we can focus on. Yeah. If we could try and move on now, because I am conscious of time, because obviously we've got the housing issues coming on later. So if you can move on to the second part of this, please, Keith.
Okay. So now I want to focus on the key route network in West Yorkshire and the major projects that we're undertaking and currently in pipeline. As I've explained before, the DFT have an hierarchy of strategic road networks, the SRN, but they're also introducing the concept of a major road network. And the major road network it's where the strategic SRN routes feed in to the local authority roads. So it's basically major roads that are linking into the strategic network. And they've got another level now of hierarchy called the MRN. And of course then we need an hierarchy. So in West Yorkshire we're developing a key route network where it carries 20,000 vehicles a day. One interesting thing is that the vehicle exercise duty, the government have announced that the proposed MRN route network, there could be a share of the National Road Fund given to local authorities to improve or replace their most important A roads in and around the SRN. So it's something we need to keep in mind.
Just on that last point, I think that's something important that we have to bear in mind, this addendum as it were there. In 1937, Churchill realised that the road fund licence, as it was then, was divisive, not bringing enough money in, and so that the pot was hypothecated. Going back now to its National Road Fund with a share being from vehicle excise duty, you then end up with a situation that we see all too often, where you get some users claiming they pay for the roads, where in effect we all do, and the issue which we haven't resolved, where we see more and more continental haulage vehicles coming onto the road without paying back in for the damage they do. And no government has yet tackled that one, but the amount that they're getting from vehicle excise duty, we know frequently, we see from the police how many people are being pulled in for not paying, and the abolition of the tax disc removes an easy way to do that. And I think this is a retrograde step. The money should have remained hypothecated, and we should have all been paying through as our central taxation for that.
Okay, a few benefits of the key route network. A greater journey time reliability for all road users. In particular, a key route network that goes from one district to another. Coordinating travel information, particularly to better deal with delay and disruption. Common standards of maintenance, road space and traffic signal operation. And one of the initiatives of the key route network and the combined authority is to bring all bodies under one in terms of traffic signal operation and control at a West Yorkshire level instead of a district level. And I think that will give some of the improvements that I've just talked about further up. And it will facilitate development and economic growth through additions to the network and upgrades, and then in particular the West Yorkshire Transport Fund major schemes. The next slide is just a key route network in Kirklees, as I say, based on the calculation of 20,000 vehicles in excess per day. Hopefully we've not missed any key routes off there that meet that metric, but they're all detailed in there on the plan of the key route network through Kirklees.
This refers back to the proposals for the Transpennine Corridor South, where we see the A6024, the Home Moss route, already as a key route. That one didn't feature on the links to that, but again, I think this is important that we keep our focus. That's already taking over 20,000 vehicles per day. If the Woodhead Road is improved or anything, that's going to take a heck of a lot more, and we need to make sure that somebody has got it in their mind and budgets for any possible mitigation on that road, because we'll come on shortly to talk about the issues in Home Firth. You know, we are veritably putting a quart into a pint pot on some of the roads that we go up the Home Valley with.
Yeah, noted. Moving on. And because you can't read that, I've produced an extract of that hopefully people can read. It's a bigger font than that's showing. That's in your pack. Has everybody got that? I'm not planning to talk per se about the schemes, but basically what I will say is each one of these corridors within the key route network tends to have a West Yorkshire Transport Fund programme scheme within Kirklees. So it's another layer of information, and we all, you know, we're looking at the SRNs, the MRNs, the key route network, and then we're developing schemes along that key route network. And I've detailed all the schemes that we're looking at in programme in and around Kirklees, and try to give it some sort of locality of the corridor where we're actually working on interventions, major interventions, and I'm talking about here a programme in excess of £150 million in terms of new road infrastructure, not just roads though, corresponding cycling and walking networks, public transport improvements, etc., etc., and also improvements to rail in and around Murfield Station and at Huddersfield Station as well. So I'll take questions on the Transport Fund schemes in and around the district, if that's okay, Chair.
Thanks, Chair. Now, I welcome the map. I mean, I asked for this 2 weeks ago when Chris Grayling was here and was told that we didn't have a map with an overlay of all the schemes on. So I'm pleased that we've now, I rang Jackie Gedman's office, who rang several people, and Keith was mentioned. So I was told we didn't have this map available. So it's good to see that Scrutiny are getting something that the Transport Secretary couldn't get. A couple of points. First, in terms of terminology, right at the top of the page, we have a scheme that's designated here as A62 to Cooper Bridge. The A62 is already at Cooper Bridge. I think what we're probably talking there is the M62 around Cooper Bridge. We're looking, by the look of that, there's a potential feasibility, I think, at the moment for a link road from somewhere on the A644 near Junction 25 coming across to the Bradley traffic lights at Cornbridge. So I think, when it says A62 to Cooper Bridge, it's already there. The Murfield Station Park and Ride. Now, I know Murfield is an international railway station, as we keep saying, but what we're talking, this isn't Park and Ride. This is simply upgrading a long overdue and probably not up to capacity upgrade of the Park and Ride are usually termed things outside that take away. A couple of omissions, Chair, that I hope officers can look at. This is the strategic and overview map of things that we're planning going forward and got in the pipeline. So where is the somewhat strangely named North Kirklees Orbital Road that goes from Brighouse in Calderdale through to Wakefield. Why isn't that a dotted line? Darren will remember quite some time ago there was talk about a Ravensthorpe ring road. Why isn't it? Yeah, we've got to have all the schemes that we were looking at so we can see how they link in. Because particularly with the junction to Combe Bridge coming up, junction 25 towards Combe Bridge, residents attended council a few weeks ago and asking Peter about a Flockton bypass. We know that the government has announced £100 million of bypass funding that potentially could address some of these issues. What we need to see is joined up. If we deliver the road to Combe Bridge, does that increase flow on the B6118 Bellstring Lane, which, as Peter will know, has had a high number of traffic incidents and crashes? You've got to look at, if we do X, what's the impact and what's our mitigation? Again, it refers back to when we talk about a TransPennine study. You can't look at things in isolation. So the omission of the North Kirklees Orbital Road, Ravensthorpe Relief Road, I think we need to see those on so we can get the full picture.
Yeah, thanks, Martin. Keith, do you want to come back on that?
Yeah, basically what's shown in front of you is schemes that we've received a programme capital sum of money. So basically on this plan, schemes that, providing we can demonstrate a value for money business case, which I've been describing before, that sum of money is available to develop the schemes and actually deliver the schemes. When you're talking about the North Kirklees Orbital route, the monies we've got to look at that is basically the feasibility. It's the feasibility of looking at the North Kirklees Orbital route. So that's the reason why it's not shown on the plan, because it's a piece of work, basically, which will demonstrate the purpose and reason for the North Kirklees Orbital route and whether it will provide the benefits and the value for money that we're looking at, which will then give us purpose to seek capital monies sometime in the future. And bearing in mind this programme is till 2025, it's sometime after that, or we take a windfall where the capital monies might become available. So that's the reason it's not on this plan.
Just a comment before you come in, Martin. Would it be useful to have something similar, or perhaps just a list of the projects that are in that kind of feasibility stage, because they're kind of a little bit down the list in terms of when they're likely to happen? Yes.
Good. So there is capital money allocated for the Home First, whatever it becomes. So it calls it a town access plan here, but whatever that becomes, there's capital money already available for that, despite the fact there hasn't been a scheme drawn up. And just reflecting on the few hours ago since we were in here when we were having a budget debate, one of the budget amendments sought feasibility funding. And remember, the rebuttal from one of our colleagues was that the trouble is, if you put feasibility funding into something, it may create an expectation you're going to deliver it. Well, the same is true with North Kirklees Orbital and others. There's a quite significant amount of money and feasibility going in, so therefore the expectation is that, building an expectation of delivery. We could colour code. Usually, if something is not programmed and got heart and coat on it, you put it as a dotted line. The point comes back that we need to understand, we've got the M2D2L, the link through the A644 through, what we've got to have with potentially with the route alignments of North Kirklees Orbital is parallel or close proximity lines going along the same corridor. Surely you've got to be balancing those. What are you doing on the M2D2L? How does that affect your feasibility, your traffic flows on the other one? You can't look at them in isolation.
Yeah, I'll bring Peter in a second.
I can understand why there's confusion. The money for the North Kirklees Orbital is money to appraise whether to do it. Because if the answer is to do it, we're talking about a very big scheme, like 150 million plus an hour. That is one of the two major feasibilities for what's referred to as transformational schemes across West Yorkshire. Now, so to get there, we are very pleased. let's say we get the appraisal says that it's a good one, we should back it and so on. Then it goes to 4 other stages of gateways to design, and then there might be some further modification, as you said. Might be looking at a line across as opposed to a specific dedicated route. And in that process, you're thinking in terms of, a production line and a time scale. Now, what we would get there is certainly not going to happen in the next 10 years. It will probably over a 15, 20-year period. So it's that kind of time scale you want to think in terms of. And the gateways will cover, and we're at the pre-gateway stage with feasibility. So I think that's when, that isn't to say by no means it ain't going to happen. Another way that this is dealt with the West Yorkshire Transport Fund is because some schemes significantly slip or are very different from what the officers originally put forward, suddenly West Yorkshire comes along and says, well, have you got some schemes that we could quickly do? And Keith's put in about 3 or 4 of those, which we have got. There was one referred to, it was actually in the Liberal amendment about Longroy Bridge. Actually, it's in there because Keith saw the opportunity, put a bid in, and we've got the money to do it. Now, similarly with the North Kirklees Orbital Road, that's the plan to ensure that this does happen. We could look at a bit of it and say, we'll put a bid in for that bit. And because it will serve its own purpose, as well as the longer-term purpose, we might get to the North Kirklees Orbital Road, shall we say, in a segmented kind of way over a period of time. And I think that's the overall structure. Keith, you could probably explain this better than I can.
Yeah, if I could just come in for a second. I think just to contradict what I said a few minutes earlier, it may be useful, I think, if we could build it into a plan like this without it getting too messy and busy, the things that are at that feasibility stage. Because as you say, Martin, it is quite useful to look at the possible projects in relation to the things that are in here with more likely funding for them to happen. Yeah. Could I bring Darren and then back to you, Keith? Yeah, because you're asking a little. Sorry, Judith, I must have missed you. Sorry. Right. Judith?
Okay. Yeah, just looking at this, so just to get this right, so all these schemes on here, you said that there is capital we can access for these schemes. Is that what you're saying? The ones that are on here? There is capital available for us to access for these schemes on here.
Yeah, the clarification is there's a full list of schemes for West Yorkshire in programme in the Transport Fund, and they're categorised as pre-2021 schemes, that's delivery by 2021, and post-2021 up to 25. All these schemes listed on here are in the Transport Fund programme. However, there is a business case justification for those schemes to actually get them towards delivery, of which we're at different stages for each of those schemes.
Come back to that. Okay. Because I think this is a really positive, having a picture and it illustrates the area, what's going on. But could I ask about the M62 Junction 24A then? What is actually going on there? Because one minute we're told there's money, then we're told there's not, then we're told there might be. Do we know what's happening there?
Okay.
There's 2 pieces of work that's happened to model and justify the 24A. To look at what 24A offers, and that's not just for Kirklees, that's for Calderdale. And in fact, because it's on the strategic road network, it's really a West Yorkshire scheme. But at the moment, it's fair to say Kirklees are taking a lead on it, and I've taken a lead on the pieces of work that we've done at this moment in time. Highways England have looked at it and have said that there's further work required because it's inconclusive. Their evidence is inconclusive of what 24A does. We've done a piece of work that is also inconclusive. And what I mean by that is that there's further, more detailed work required to work out what the benefits of 24A is. And that's not just for Kirklees, but it's for Calderdale and the SRN road network itself. So at this moment in time, there's nothing to say really other than work is ongoing to determine what 24 may look like and what it actually does for not just the local economy but the regional economy as well.
Yeah, I don't need loads of detail now, but I think given the M2D2L is down for starting 18-19, that you need to sit as Dewsbury members down around the table and explain at the right time if it's one of these projects that the business case isn't quite there yet, but if it is, you need to sit us down and explain exactly what that is. That would be appreciated.
Yeah, I think that's an important point. If I could just finish. Yeah. If I could just finish, Martin, I think it is an important point that Darren's made, that local members do get a thorough briefing on things that are under proposal, so that they can have an input and give that local dimension to discussions. Yeah. Okay.
Yeah.
Is the capital funding allocated for the Home First on here, which we were told, the only ones on here have got capital. So presumably, there's a scheme drawn up ready for this Home First bypass.
As I said, that all the schemes are at different stages within development. At this moment in time, yes, we are looking at all options for Home Firth Town Centre, and the public information is on the website that we've posted, is that we're looking to the issues in and around Victoria Street in Home Firth, and looking to dilute the traffic and move them around Home Firth in a different way. So the options for that, there is a number of options. So as part of the business case development at this stage, we've got to look at a number of options. And that's everything from do something on the existing corridors and roads to do something a little bit more transformational, which is to think about another link that avoids Victoria Street. And then there's another multiple options within that. So at this moment in time, we're not ready to determine what the optimal option that we would like to put forward for Home Firth is. But yes, there is capital money subject to the business case being developed of a substantial amount of money in programme to be spent and delivered by 2021.
Just one point there. I think with questions like that, very specific questions, it can be difficult in Keith's position to give the full details in a public meeting like this. I'm sure outside the meeting he may be able to give a little bit more detail around things. I think with things like this, as they progress as well, it would be good to get some feedback to look at how things are moving on. Looking at time, I think it would be good now to draw things to a close. I think it's been very interesting presentations and some good debate, excellent questioning around these issues. Is there anything else that anybody wants to raise before we move on? Yes.
Just that point about member involvement. I think it's good to involve members in the early stage when you're drawing things up and designing things, not just to tell them what you're doing after it's drawn up, because members might have some really useful information and insight that could be helpful.
Yeah, I think that's very important, both for the members and for the communities that they represent, that they do feel that there is a channel through which their views and their input into these things are expressed. Thank you. Just to finish off, can I thank Keith and Simon for coming along this morning. Really interesting, been very open and informative in the way you've answered our questions. A number of issues have come up there which we can pursue further, so thanks very much. Okay. Right, so if we can fairly quickly try and tie up the last two items on the agenda, then we'll have a short break before we go into the private meeting to look at the housing issues. Right, item 6 is looking at the work programme for the rest of this year. For the next meeting, the suggestion is that we spend some time reflecting on issues that we've covered so far this year. So it will be both the housing issues and transport issues. That will be covered in a public session, and then we're going to return to transport in a private session with this input from Network Rail to look at the progress with the Transpennine upgrade. Is everybody happy with that for the next meeting?
Judith won't listen, she says. She won't listen, it's all right. On the Transpennine route upgrade, could we ask Kieran if there is any potential for public statement from it? Because obviously it's a key concern for people, and whilst it's still waiting for an outcome from DFD and ministers, it'd be useful if we could have something in the public domain.
Yeah, completely agree. 'Cause I do worry a little bit about private meetings. Yeah. People wonder what these councillors and rail planners are up to behind closed doors. So if we can, we need to explore it with him. One of my worries really for his presentation is that there were initially some indications that decisions might have been made by March, but as often with these things, does appear to be a little bit of slippage. So it will be interesting to see how much you can tell us about what has been definitely agreed. Yeah. Judith, did you want to say something? Right. Okay. So moving on to item 7, the date of the next meeting is Thursday the 15th of March at 9:30 here. And sorry. No, well, we can cover that in the next part. Is that, if that's okay? Yeah. Yeah, give us a little bit more time, and we'll be able to get some input from officers, I think, related to that. Yeah. Okay, thanks. So we're going to have it. Sorry.
What time did you say the next meeting was? Because I thought we were moving them to 10 o'clock.